My name is Rosalie, and I'm 34 years old. I've been an elementary school teacher for over a decade and married to Michael for 5 years. Despite trying everything to fit into his wealthy family, I've always felt like an outsider looking in. When they excluded me from planning my mother-in-law Patricia's birthday dinner, something inside me finally snapped. I took a stand that shocked everyone, especially my husband. Nobody expected what I did next, but sometimes enough is simply enough. Before I tell you what happened, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Ohio. My parents worked incredibly hard. My dad is a plumber and my mum is a receptionist at a dental office. They saved every penny to put me through college, making me the first in our family to earn a degree. I became an elementary school teacher because I genuinely love helping children learn and grow. The joy on a child's face when they finally understand a concept is worth more than any paycheck. I met Michael at a charity fundraiser for the local children's hospital. I was volunteering, setting up decorations and managing the children's activity station. He was there as a donor, looking dashing in his tailored suit. Our eyes met across the room in that cliché way you see in movies, and he made his way over to introduce himself. "You're amazing with the kids," he said, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners when he smiled. "I've been watching you for the past hour." In any other context that might have sounded creepy, but there was such genuine warmth in his voice that I just laughed. "Is that your way of asking if I'm single?" I replied. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "That obvious, huh?" Our romance was whirlwind and unexpected. Michael came from a world so different from mine that sometimes it felt like we were from different planets. My modest one-bedroom apartment with second-hand furniture contrasted sharply with his luxury downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. But somehow, those differences didn't matter when we were together. When Michael proposed after 8 months of dating, I was overjoyed, but also nervous about becoming part of his family. I'd met his parents several times by then, and while they were perfectly polite, there was always an undercurrent of assessment in their interactions with me. Patricia Harrington was tall, slim, and always impeccably dressed, with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that comes from regular salon appointments and expensive skincare routines. William, Michael's father, was more approachable, a self-made man who had built his construction company from the ground up. They lived in a sprawling mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in town, complete with a pool tennis court and a 3-car garage housing vehicles that cost more than my annual salary. During our engagement, Patricia seemed to make an effort to welcome me. She invited me to lunch at her country club, introduced me to her friends, and even took me shopping for the wedding. "You're going to be a Harrington now," she said, examining my outfit with a critical eye. "We need to make sure you look the part." I tried not to be offended, telling myself she was just trying to help. Michael assured me that his mother was simply excited to have a daughter since she'd only had sons, Michael and his younger brother Thomas. The wedding planning should have been my first real warning. What started as Patricia offering to help quickly turned into her taking complete control. My ideas were politely acknowledged and then disregarded. When I mentioned wanting a simple garden ceremony, Patricia laughed as if I'd told a charming joke before proceeding to book the city's most exclusive hotel ballroom. When I showed her the bridesmaid dresses I liked, she pursed her lips and said, "Oh, darling, we can do so much better than that." The guest list was another battleground. Somehow several of my cousins and my parents' close friends didn't receive invitations, while people I'd never met, business associates of William's and Patricia's social circle, were added without my knowledge. When I raised this with Michael, he just said, "Mum probably made a mistake with the addresses. Don't worry about it so much, Rosie. It's just one day." But it wasn't just one day. It was the beginning of a pattern that would define my marriage for the next 5 years. The wedding itself was beautiful, but felt more like Patricia's event than ours. In the photos, she positioned herself prominently beside Michael, while I was placed slightly to the side, almost as an afterthought. At the time, I chalked it up to wedding day chaos and tried to focus on the positive. I was marrying the man I loved. What I didn't realize then was that this was just the first of many times I would be made to feel like an accessory in my own life rather than an essential part of the family I had married into. The pattern of exclusion became clearer as our marriage progressed. 3 incidents stand out in my memory as particularly painful milestones on this journey. The first occurred about a year into our marriage when the entire Harrington family took their annual vacation to Martha's Vineyard. I was excited to be included in this tradition, packing carefully for the 2-week stay at their beach house. But from the moment we arrived, it became obvious that while I might physically be present, I was not truly part of the experience. Patricia had scheduled numerous family activities, sailing excursions, wine tastings, dinners with longtime family friends, but somehow I was often left out of the loop. "Oh, didn't Michael tell you about the boat trip today?" she would say, all wide-eyed innocence, when I appeared at breakfast in casual clothes while everyone else was dressed for sailing. Or, "I thought you might want to rest today, dear. You seemed so tired yesterday." I spent many afternoons alone at the beach house, while the family was off enjoying themselves together. When I confronted Michael about it, he seemed genuinely confused. "Mom said you didn't want to come to the Bennett's dinner party. She told me you had a headache." I hadn't said anything of the sort. When I told Michael this, he frowned and said, "There must have been a misunderstanding. Mum wouldn't deliberately exclude you." But the misunderstandings happened too frequently to be coincidental. The second incident was during our second Christmas as a married couple. The Harringtons had an elaborate gift exchange tradition with personalised presents for each family member. On Christmas morning, everyone received beautifully wrapped packages with thoughtful items clearly selected with care. Except for me. My gifts were generic: a scarf that wasn't my style, a cookbook for a cuisine I had mentioned disliking, and a gift card to a store I never shopped at. "I just wasn't sure what you would like," Patricia said with a shrug when she noticed my quiet disappointment. "You're so different from us." The third, and perhaps most telling incident, was during a family photo shoot for William's 65th birthday. Patricia arranged everyone in a specific formation, placing me at the very edge of the group. When the photographer suggested I move closer to Michael in the centre, Patricia quickly interjected. No, this composition is perfect. Rosalie looks fine where she is." Later, when the photos were printed and framed, I noticed something odd about the one displayed prominently in their living room. The image had been cropped and I was barely visible at the edge of the frame. It was as if Patricia wanted the option to erase me from the family narrative with a simple snip of the scissors. Throughout these years, Patricia maintained a steady stream of passive-aggressive comments about my career. "Teaching is so noble, dear, but surely you don't plan to do it forever. My appearance. That dress is very brave. I could never pull off something so casual at a formal event. And my homemaking skills. Michael tells me you make the most interesting dinners, so creative to use pre-made sauce." Michael's sister-in-law, Audrey, who was married to Thomas, quickly picked up on Patricia's attitude and began treating me similarly. Audrey came from a background similar to the Harringtons and had been embraced by Patricia from day one. She would often exchange knowing glances with Patricia when I spoke, as if sharing a private joke at my expense. As time went on, I found myself growing increasingly frustrated and my self-confidence diminishing. I began to second-guess everything: my clothes, my speech, my table manners. Was I using the wrong fork, laughing too loudly, taking up too much space? My salvation came in the form of my neighbour Jen, who moved in next door about 3 years into my marriage. Jen was refreshingly straightforward and quickly became the friend I desperately needed. She was the first person to name what was happening to me. "Rosalie, what you're describing isn't normal family dynamics," she said one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on her patio. "Patricia isn't just being difficult. She's deliberately excluding you and undermining your place in the family. And Michael is enabling her behaviour by making excuses." Hearing someone else validate my feelings was both a relief and a confirmation of my worst fears. At Jen's suggestion, I started seeing a therapist to help me navigate the emotional toll of my in-law situation. Dr. Martin helped me understand that I wasn't crazy or overly sensitive. I was being subjected to a subtle form of emotional abuse. Meanwhile, the distance between Michael and me grew. He seemed increasingly torn between his loyalty to his mother and his love for me. When I tried to discuss the situation with him, he would become defensive. "That's just how Mom is," he would say. "She doesn't mean anything by it. You're taking it too personally." But it was personal. It was my life, my marriage, my sense of belonging that was being systematically dismantled. And as Patricia's 60th birthday approached, things were about to come to a head in a way none of us could have anticipated. Patricia's 60th birthday was being treated as a milestone event, with planning beginning months in advance. Michael mentioned that his mother wanted a special celebration at Le Ciel, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, known for its month-long waiting list and celebrity clientele. "Mum's really excited about it," Michael told me one evening. She's already discussing the menu with the chef. I nodded mentally, preparing myself for another event where I would be present but not really included. Just let me know what I can do to help, I offered, trying to be supportive despite my misgivings. A few days later, I noticed Michael's phone lighting up with notifications from a group chat I wasn't familiar with. When I glanced over, I caught the name Mum's Birthday Planning before Michael quickly turned his phone over. "Is there a group chat about Patricia's birthday?" I asked casually. Michael looked uncomfortable. "Oh yeah, just some preliminary planning stuff. Nothing concrete yet. Can I be added to it? I'd like to help with the planning." "Sure," he said after a slight hesitation. "I'll ask Audrey to add you." She set it up, but 3 days passed and I still hadn't been added to the chat. When I reminded Michael, he claimed he'd forgotten and would do it right away. That evening, I received a notification that I'd been added to the group. As I scrolled through the previous messages, my heart sank. The planning wasn't preliminary at all. They had already decided on the date, time, guest list, menu, and even the seating arrangement. Discussions had been going on for weeks, deliberately excluding me until I specifically asked to be included. I tried to participate, suggesting a special wine that Patricia had once mentioned enjoying and offering to help with the party favors. My messages sat unacknowledged while the conversation continued around me as if I hadn't spoken. When I suggested a particular dessert that Patricia had praised at a previous dinner, Audrey finally responded with, "We've already finalized the menu with the chef, but thanks." A few days later, I overheard Michael on the phone with Audrey, discussing the seating arrangements for the dinner. "I know Mum wants the immediate family at the main table," Audrey was saying, her voice carrying clearly through the speaker. "So that's you, me, Thomas, Dad, and Mum. We can put Rosalie at table 2 with Mum's cousins from Seattle." I waited for Michael to object, to point out that as his wife, I was immediate family and should be seated with him. Instead, he simply said, "That sounds fine. Mum will be happy with that arrangement." My presence in the group chat did nothing to change the dynamic. Patricia began assigning tasks to various family members. William was in charge of the wine selection, Thomas and Audrey were handling the music and photographer, and Michael was managing the guest transportation. Rosalie, Patricia wrote the first time she had directly addressed me in the chat. "Would you mind picking up the cake on your way to the restaurant? The bakery closes at 5, so you'll need to get there early. The rest of us will be having pre-dinner cocktails at the bar, but you can join us after you've delivered the cake to the kitchen staff." In other words, while the family was enjoying the start of the celebration together, I would be running errands. When I pointed this out to Michael, he sighed in exasperation. "It's just picking up a cake, Rosalie. Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" This is Mum's special day. The final straw came when I was using Michael's laptop to order a birthday gift for Patricia. An email notification popped up from Audrey with the subject line, "Mum's real celebration day after." Here, curious and increasingly suspicious, I clicked on it. The email detailed plans for a family brunch the day after the restaurant dinner, a more intimate celebration with just us, as Audrey put it. Attached was a guest list that included every member of the Harrington family, several of Patricia's close friends, and even the family's longtime housekeeper. My name was notably absent. When Michael came home, I confronted him with the email. "Were you going to tell me about this brunch, or was I supposed to find out when everyone disappeared the next day?" Michael had the grace to look ashamed. "I was going to tell you. It's just a small family thing. I am family, Michael. At least I'm supposed to be. Your wife, remember?" His expression hardened. "It's my mother's birthday. Not everything is about you. Why can't you just let her have this without making a scene?" His words hit me like a physical blow. After 5 years of trying to fit in, of making excuses for their behavior, of diminishing myself to accommodate Patricia's need to be the center of attention, I was still the outsider. And worse, my husband didn't see anything wrong with that. "You're right," I said quietly. "It's not about me. It never has been." I walked out of the room, leaving Michael looking confused by my sudden acquiescence, but inside, something had shifted. For the first time in our marriage, I was seeing the situation with perfect clarity, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. After my argument with Michael, I retreated to our guest bedroom and cried until I had no tears left. 5 years of suppressed hurt and anger poured out of me like a dam breaking. When I finally calmed down enough to think clearly, I called Jen. "Can I come over?" I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. 15 minutes later, I was sitting on Jen's couch, a glass of wine in my hand, telling her everything. The group chat, the seating arrangement, the cake errand, and the secret, real celebration I wasn't invited to. They've been doing this for our entire marriage, I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke, making it clear that I'm not really one of them, and Michael either doesn't see it or doesn't care enough to stop it. Jen listened without interrupting her expression, growing increasingly outraged. When I finished, she took my hand. Rosalie, this isn't just rude or thoughtless behavior. This is systematic emotional abuse. They're deliberately isolating you and making you feel worthless, and Michael is complicit. What do I do? I asked, feeling utterly lost. What do you want to do? Jen countered it. Really think about it. What would make you feel like you've stood up for yourself? I sat in silence for a long moment, considering her question. What did I want? An apology seemed inadequate after years of mistreatment. I wanted them to understand how it felt to be excluded, to be an afterthought, to be made invisible in your own family. And then it hit me. I remembered something Michael had mentioned casually the week before. Patricia had been boasting to all her friends about the exclusive reservation at Le Ciel, telling everyone how impossible it was to get and how special the evening would be. The reservation had been made 6 months in advance, and Patricia had been counting down the days. I think I know what to do, I said slowly, but I'll need some time to think it through. When I returned home, Michael was already asleep in our bedroom. I went to the guest room and spent the night planning. In the morning, Michael apologized perfunctorily for our argument, but didn't address the actual issues I'd raised. I accepted his apology with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I've been thinking about it, and you're right, I told him. It's Patricia's day, and I want it to be special for her. In fact, I'd like to help more with the arrangements. Would you mind adding me as an authorized user on the family credit card? Just for the birthday expenses, of course. Michael looked relieved and a little surprised by my change of attitude. Of course. That's a great idea. Mum will appreciate your help. Over the next week, I laid the groundwork carefully. I received the family credit card and confirmed that I had authorization to make changes to the restaurant reservation as it had been booked under the Harrington name. I researched alternative venues, places that would be the opposite of what Patricia would want, and settled on a dive bar across town known for its greasy burgers and rowdy weekend crowds. I created a fake confirmation email from Le Ciel, complete with the restaurant's logo and professional formatting, detailing the updated reservation information. I made arrangements for the custom birthday cake Patricia had ordered to be delivered to a local women's shelter instead of being held for pickup. Throughout this process, I experienced moments of doubt and guilt. Was I really going to go through with this? Was I becoming as manipulative as Patricia? But then I would remember the years of subtle put-downs, of being pushed to the periphery of family photos, of forgotten invitations and deliberate exclusions. I would remember Michael's words, "It's not everything about you," and my resolve would harden. The night before Patricia's birthday dinner, I sent a message to the group chat. Bivivu. Everything is confirmed and ready to go for tomorrow. The reservation is at 7 p.m. and the private dining room will be ready. Can't wait to celebrate Patricia's special day. Everyone responded with excitement. Everyone except Michael, who gave me a curious look across the living room. You seem different, he said. More, I don't know, confident? I smiled. Just looking forward to tomorrow. Before going to bed, I took precautions. I changed my passwords on all personal accounts, transferred some money from our joint account to my private one, and packed an overnight bag that I hid in the trunk of my car. I wasn't sure how things would play out, but I wanted to be prepared for any scenario. That night, I slept better than I had in months. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control of my own life. The day of Patricia's birthday arrived. I spent the morning getting ready, selecting a red dress that I knew looked good on me, one that Patricia had once described as a bit too attention-seeking for a family event. I styled my hair, applied my makeup carefully, and even added the pearl earrings Michael had given me for our first anniversary. When Michael saw me, his eyebrows raised in appreciation. Wow, you look amazing. Thank you, I said, giving him a genuine smile. It's an important day after all. As we prepared to leave for the restaurant, I made my move. I think I'll drive separately, I told Michael. I need to stop by the bakery for the cake. Remember, I'll meet you all there. Michael nodded, distracted by a text from his father asking about the parking situation at the restaurant. Okay, see you there. Don't be late. I wouldn't miss it for the world, I replied truthfully. I drove to a small cafe across the street from Le Ciel, positioning myself where I could see the entrance to the restaurant. I ordered a cappuccino and waited, my heart pounding with a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. At 6:45 p.m, the Harringtons began to arrive. First came William and Patricia She in an expensive new dress that she had undoubtedly purchased just for this occasion, he looking distinguished in a tailored suit. Patricia was practically glowing with anticipation. Next came Thomas and Audrey, followed by several other relatives and close friends, all in formal attire appropriate for one of the city's most exclusive establishments. Michael arrived last, checking his watch and glancing around, probably looking for me. The entire group gathered at the entrance, Patricia clearly holding court as she accepted birthday wishes and compliments on her appearance, and then they went inside. I checked my watch. It would only be a matter of minutes now. Sure enough, less than 5 minutes later, Michael emerged from the restaurant, phone in hand, a confused expression on his face. He made a call, undoubtedly to me, which I let go to voicemail. He went back inside. Another few minutes passed before the entire group came bursting out of the doors, Patricia in the lead, her face a mask of outrage and disbelief. I could hear her voice carrying across the street. "What do you mean, no reservation? We booked this 6 months ago. Do you have any idea who we are?" The maitre d' stood at the door, his expression professionally apologetic but firm. More heated discussion followed, with Patricia becoming increasingly agitated. William placed a calming hand on her arm, which she shook off angrily. Michael was still trying to call me, his expression shifting from confusion to suspicion. I watched as the reality of the situation sank in. There would be no exclusive private dining room, no custom menu, no celebration at the restaurant Patricia had been bragging about to all her friends. Her perfect birthday evening was crumbling before her eyes. After about 20 minutes of arguing, during which time I imagined the maitre d' explaining that not only was there no reservation under the Harrington name, but it had been cancelled with a full refund processed several days ago, the group finally admitted defeat. They huddled together, clearly discussing alternative plans. I saw Michael showing them something on his phone, probably the confirmation email I had sent to the group chat. More confusion, more frustrated gestures from Patricia. Finally, they all returned to their cars and drove off, presumably heading to the dive bar address that had been included in my fake confirmation email as the alternate venue held as backup. Once they were gone, I walked across the street to Le Ciel. The maitre d' recognized me from my driver's license photo, which I had provided when cancelling the reservation. "Ms. Harrington," he asked, using my married name. "Your table is ready. Will the rest of your party be joining you?" "No," I said with a smile. "It's just me tonight." I was seated at a lovely table by the window, where I ordered the most expensive item on the menu and a glass of champagne. As I savoured each bite of my perfectly prepared meal, I composed a text message to the family group chat. "Enjoy celebrating with your real family." Then I turned off my phone and ordered dessert. When I finally returned home around 10 p.m, the house was quiet but vibrating with tension. I found Michael in the living room, his face a storm cloud of anger and confusion. Patricia sat on the sofa, her makeup streaked from crying, while William stood by the window, his expression unreadable. Thomas and Audrey were there too, both looking uncomfortable. "What the hell, Rosalie?" Michael exploded as soon as I walked in. "Where have you been? Do you have any idea what you've done?" I set down my purse calmly. "I had dinner at Le Ciel. The duck was excellent. I highly recommend it." Patricia made a choked sound of outrage. You cancelled our reservation. How could you do such a thing? The same way you've been cancelling me for the past 5 years. I replied, my voice steady, by deliberately making choices that exclude and diminish me. "That's ridiculous," Patricia sputtered. "We've always treated you like family. Have you? Let's review, shall we?" I ticked off points on my fingers. The Martha's Vineyard vacation, where I was conveniently forgotten for half the activities. The Christmas gifts that showed you know nothing about me and don't care to learn. The family photo where you cropped me out. The seating arrangement for tonight that put me at a separate table from my husband. The real celebration tomorrow that I wasn't invited to. Should I go on? Michael stared at me, his anger giving way to confusion. "What are you talking about? What real celebration?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the email from Audrey. "The brunch tomorrow that everyone knew about except me. The one your mother has been planning as the real family celebration after the obligatory dinner where the outsider, that would be me, had to be included." Michael took the phone, reading the email with growing disbelief. "I didn't know about this," he said, looking at his mother. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. It was just a small gathering. For 20 people, I pointed out, including the housekeeper, but not your son's wife. The room fell silent as the weight of my words sank in. Audrey looked at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. William, interestingly, was watching Patricia with an expression that suggested this wasn't the first time he'd seen this side of her. "You ruined the most important day of my life," Patricia said, her voice breaking dramatically. "All my friends, the special menu, everything. Destroyed because you wanted attention." I laughed, genuinely amused by her perspective. "The most important day of your life, more important than your wedding day, the days your children were born, the day your first grandchild arrives, if you're ever lucky enough to have one. It's a birthday, Patricia, one of many, and yes, I ruined it. Just like you've been ruining every important day for me since I married your son." Michael stepped toward me, his expression a mixture of anger and dawning comprehension. "Rosalie, this isn't like you. You don't do things like this." "You're right," I agreed. "I don't. I've spent 5 years trying to fit in, trying to be accepted, trying to be good enough for your family. I've smiled through insults, accepted exclusion, and made excuses for inexcusable behavior. But everyone has a breaking point. This was mine. I turned to face all of them. Do you know what it feels like to be treated as if you don't matter? To be constantly reminded that you're not really part of the family, to watch your husband stand by while his mother systematically undermines you." No one spoke. Even Patricia seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "I'm staying with Jen for a few days," I continued, addressing Michael. "I need some time to think about our marriage and whether it has a future." That broke the spell. Michael stepped forward, reaching for me. "Rosalie, don't. We can work this out." I stepped back, avoiding his touch. "Can we? You've had 5 years to stand up for me, Michael. 5 years to tell your mother that her behavior was unacceptable. But you never did. You always chose the path of least resistance, which meant letting me suffer rather than risking your mother's displeasure. That's not fair," he protested, but there was doubt in his eyes. "Isn't it? When was the last time you chose me over your mother's wishes? When was the last time you noticed how unhappy I've been?" As Michael struggled for a response, Patricia found her voice again. "This is absurd. You're acting like a victim when you just deliberately sabotaged a beautiful family celebration out of spite." "No, Mum, she's right." Everyone turned to look at Thomas, who had been silent until now. He met my gaze with unexpected sympathy. "We have been excluding Rosalie, all of us, following your lead." Patricia gasped in outrage. "How dare you take her side?" "It's not about sides," Thomas said quietly. "It's about the truth. You've never accepted Rosalie because she wasn't from our social circle. You've made that clear from day one." As Patricia began to protest, William finally spoke. "That's enough, Patricia." His voice was quiet, but carried an authority that silenced the room. "The girl is right. You've gone too far this time." And Patricia turned to her husband in shock. "William, I've watched you push away every person who doesn't fit your narrow view of what our family should be." William continued, his voice tired. "You did it with my sister when I married you. You tried to do it with Thomas's college friends, and you've been doing it to Rosalie since the day Michael brought her home. I've kept the peace for too long, and I'm not doing it anymore." In the stunned silence that followed, I picked up the overnight bag I'd prepared and headed for the door. Michael followed me. "Please don't go," he said, his voice breaking. "We can fix this. I'll do better, I promise." I looked at him, this man I had loved enough to endure years of subtle abuse for. "I hope you will do better, Michael, but I need time to decide if it's too late for us." As I walked out the door, I heard Patricia's voice rise in indignation, already spinning the story to cast herself as the victim of my unreasonable behavior. But for the first time since I'd married into the Harrington family, I didn't care what Patricia thought of me. I got into my car and drove to Jen's house, feeling lighter than I had in years. The week apart from Michael gave me the clarity I desperately needed. Staying in Jen's guest room, away from the constant tension of my married life, I began to remember who I was before I became Mrs. Harrington. A confident, independent woman who didn't need anyone's approval to feel worthy. Michael called and texted constantly for the first 2 days. I read his messages but didn't respond, needing space to sort through my feelings without his influence. On the 3rd day, he showed up at Jen's door with a bouquet of sunflowers. My favourite, not the roses Patricia always insisted were the only appropriate flowers for a woman. Jen answered the door. "She's not ready to see you yet," she told him firmly. "Can you at least give her these?" Michael asked, his voice carrying to where I sat in the living room. "And tell her I love her. Tell her I'm sorry." After he left, Jen brought in the flowers. "He looks terrible," she reported, "like he hasn't slept in days." "Good," I said. But there was no real satisfaction in it. Despite everything, I still loved Michael. I was angry with him, disappointed in him, but I couldn't simply turn off my feelings. That evening, I received a text from Michael that was different from his previous pleas. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I never stood up for you. You're right. I've been a coward, afraid of rocking the boat with my family, especially my mother. I've been in therapy for the past 2 days trying to understand why I let this happen. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know I'm working on becoming the husband you deserve." The message brought tears to my eyes. It was the first time Michael had acknowledged the deeper issue instead of just apologizing for the immediate situation. Over the next few days, his texts continued, each one showing more insight than the last. He was reading books about healthy family boundaries. He had found a couples counselor who specialized in toxic family dynamics. He was having conversations with his father about Patricia's behavior patterns. A week after I left, I agreed to meet Michael at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop downtown. He looked different somehow, less polished, more authentic. The perfectly styled hair that Patricia had always insisted upon was slightly rumpled, and he was wearing jeans instead of the designer slacks she preferred. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I've missed you so much." "I've missed you too," I admitted. But missing someone isn't enough reason to stay in an unhealthy relationship. Michael nodded. "I know. That's why I want us to try couples counselling. I've found someone who I think can help us. But first, I need you to know that I've had a serious conversation with my mother." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "What kind of conversation?" "The kind where I told her that her treatment of you has been unacceptable and that if she wants to be part of our lives, she needs to make real changes. I told her that you are my priority, my family, and that I won't tolerate anyone treating you with disrespect. Not even her." I studied his face, looking for signs that he was saying what he thought I wanted to hear, but his eyes were clear and direct, holding my gaze without wavering. "And how did she take that?" I asked. Michael smiled grimly. "About as well as you'd expect. There were tears, accusations, guilt trips. The full Patricia Harrington emotional manipulation playbook. But I held firm. I told her that this isn't negotiable. Either she treats you with genuine respect or she doesn't see us." I was impressed but still cautious. "Words are easy, Michael. It's actions that matter." "I know. That's why I'd like us to meet with her together, to set clear boundaries and expectations, but only when you're ready and only if you want to." The old Rosalie would have jumped at this chance to make peace, to be accepted by Patricia at last. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I'll think about it," I said. "In the meantime, I'd like to try the couples counselling." Michael's relief was palpable. "Thank you. That's all I'm asking for, a chance to make things right." 2 weeks after our coffee shop meeting, I agreed to a mediated conversation with Patricia. The meeting was held in Dr. Martin's office, my therapist on my territory, not Patricia's. Michael insisted on this arrangement, another small sign that he was truly committed to change. Patricia arrived looking uncomfortable and out of place in the modest office building. She was dressed impeccably as always, but there was a tightness around her eyes that betrayed her tension. "Thank you for coming, Patricia," Dr. Martin said professionally. "Rosalie has suggested this meeting as a first step toward healing your relationship." Patricia glanced at me, then at Michael. "I'm only here because my son asked me to be," she said stiffly. "That's fine," I replied calmly. "Your reasons for being here don't matter as much as what happens going forward." Dr. Martin guided us through a structured conversation. I spoke about my experiences in the Harrington family, the pattern of exclusion, the subtle and not so subtle ways I had been made to feel unwelcome. Michael supported my account, adding his own observations about dynamics he had previously been blind to. Patricia tried several times to deflect or minimize. "You're being overly sensitive," she said at one point. "I never meant to make you feel excluded. If you felt that way, it's because you came into our family with insecurities about your background." I saw Michael tense beside me, ready to jump to my defense, but I placed a hand on his arm. "This is exactly the problem, Patricia," I said evenly. "You refuse to take responsibility for your actions. You turn every criticism back on the other person. That's not how healthy relationships work." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "And I suppose sabotaging my birthday dinner was your idea of a healthy relationship." "No," I admitted. It was petty and vindictive, but it was also the first time in 5 years that I stood up for myself instead of shrinking to accommodate your ego. I'm not proud of how I did it, but I'm not sorry that I finally drew a line. The session continued with moments of tension and occasional breakthroughs. Patricia was never going to have a complete epiphany and transform into a warm, accepting mother-in-law. But by the end of the hour, she had at least acknowledged that some of her behavior had been hurtful, even if she claimed it wasn't intentional. I was only trying to maintain certain standards, she said, as if that explained everything. Your standards shouldn't come at the expense of your son's happiness, I replied. Or mine. As we prepared to leave, Patricia paused. I suppose we should discuss Thanksgiving arrangements, she said clearly, attempting to regain some control over the situation. Michael and I exchanged glances. We had already discussed this. Actually, Mom, Michael said firmly, Rosalie and I have decided to host Thanksgiving at our house this year. You and Dad are welcome to join us, but we'll be setting the menu and the guest list. Patricia looked shocked. But we always have Thanksgiving at our house. It's tradition. Traditions can change, Michael said simply. This is important to us. It was a small victory, but an important one. As we left Dr. Martin's office, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, our marriage could be saved. The months that followed were a period of reconstruction, both for my marriage and for my sense of self. Michael and I continued with couples counselling, learning to communicate more effectively and to present a united front when dealing with his family. Michael worked hard in his individual therapy to understand the patterns that had led him to prioritise his mother's approval over his wife's well-being. The changes in our relationship with the Harrington family were gradual but significant. Michael began declining invitations to events where I was treated as an afterthought. He corrected his mother when she made passive-aggressive comments. He stood beside me physically and emotionally at family gatherings, no longer allowing me to be pushed to the periphery. Patricia's response to these changes was mixed. There were tantrums and tears, manipulative phone calls, and attempts to rally other family members to her side. But to my surprise, she found less support than she expected. William, after years of keeping the peace, began to assert himself more in their relationship. Thomas and Audrey, perhaps seeing the positive changes in Michael, began to establish their own boundaries with Patricia. The most unexpected development came from Patricia's social circle. The story of the cancelled birthday dinner had spread with various versions circulating among her friends. Some were sympathetic to Patricia, but others, particularly those who had experienced her controlling behaviour firsthand, privately reached out to me with messages of support. Patricia has always been the queen bee, one longtime family friend told me over coffee. It's refreshing to see someone finally stand up to her. Meanwhile, Michael and I were rebuilding our connection. We went on dates, rediscovering what had drawn us together in the first place. We talked about our future, what we wanted both individually and as a couple. We discussed having children, something I had been hesitant about given the family dynamics. I want our kids to grow up in a healthy environment, I told Michael one evening as we walked along the riverfront. I don't want them to feel like they have to earn love or approval. They won't, Michael promised. We'll make sure of it. 6 months after the birthday dinner incident, I discovered I was pregnant. The news brought a mixture of joy and anxiety. I was excited to start this new chapter with Michael, but concerned about how pregnancy and parenthood would affect our still healing relationship with his family. We need to be clear about our boundaries from the beginning, I told Michael as we discussed how to share the news with his parents. No unannounced visits, no undermining our parenting decisions, no playing favourites if we have more children later. Michael agreed without hesitation. We'll present a united front. This is our child and we make the rules. When we told Patricia and William about the pregnancy, Patricia's reaction was complex. There was genuine excitement. Becoming a grandmother had been a long-held desire, but also calculation, as if she was already planning how to establish her dominance in this new relationship. I'll have the nursery in our house ready by the time the baby arrives, she announced immediately, for when you need breaks or want to go out. That's thoughtful, Mum, Michael said carefully. But we won't be leaving the baby overnight for quite some time. And when we do need childcare, we'll let you know. Patricia looked momentarily taken aback, but recovered quickly. Of course, dear, I just want to help. Over the following months, Patricia made visible efforts to change her behaviour toward me. The attempts were sometimes awkward and clearly difficult for her, but they were genuine. She asked questions about my pregnancy and actually listened to the answers. She included me in conversations rather than talking around me. When she hosted a baby shower, she consulted me on the guest list and menu. I remained cautious but open to these changes. I had learned that standing up for myself didn't mean holding on to resentment forever. It meant establishing healthy boundaries and being willing to accept genuine efforts at reconciliation. By the time our daughter Sophia was born, the dynamic between me and Patricia had shifted significantly. Not into friendship exactly, but into a respectful coexistence built on our shared love for Michael and now for Sophia. The most telling moment came when Patricia visited us in the hospital after Sophia's birth. Instead of barging in and taking over as I had feared, she knocked gently on the door and asked, "Is this a good time to meet my granddaughter?" As I watched her hold Sophia for the first time, tears glistening in her eyes, I realized something important. Patricia's controlling behavior had always stemmed from fear. Fear of losing her position in the family, fear of change, fear of being irrelevant. By standing firm and refusing to be diminished, I hadn't just changed my place in the family, I had changed the family itself. 3 years after the birthday dinner incident, I hosted a dinner party at our home. It wasn't a grand affair in an exclusive restaurant, just a warm gathering of friends and family in the house Michael and I had bought in a neighborhood we both loved. As I was preparing the table, there was a knock at the door. It was Patricia arriving early, as she often did. But instead of immediately inspecting my arrangements and offering suggestions, she asked, "Can I help with anything?" And then in a moment that would have been unimaginable 3 years earlier, she added with genuine hesitation, "Unless you'd prefer to do it yourself, it's your home after all." In that small moment of consideration, I saw how far we had all come. Not to perfection, not to an idealized version of family harmony, but to a place of mutual respect where each of us had room to be ourselves. Have you ever had to take a dramatic stand to be respected? Share your story in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to demand respect. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply refusing to be treated as less than you deserve.